Welcome. We're so excited to delve into creative aging. Pasadena Village is really excited to sponsor this event today, and we welcome you whether you're from near or far. We had the opportunity to put on this program because of the generous funding of the Navigate Foundation. We funded an entire creative aging initiative for Pasadena Village. So much more to come. In programming that is all member led here at Pasadena Village. So we are a busy group of older adults who are aging in place and supporting each other through many ways, but many times through these small group gatherings. And we find that cultural experiences and artistic endeavors are ways of bringing people together, that especially if you're new to getting to know each other. So I am especially thrilled to have Jessica and Kate here today from Creative Spark. But also I invite you to come to any of our programming at Pasadena Village. On our community events page, we have the ones that are free and open to the public, and we've had quite a few going on lately. The one that's coming up, if you are in the Pasadena area, is we're having our third session of Walk with Ease, which is a way to get back into a walking routine, especially if you have something like arthritis or joint pain that might have change your walking habits. It's a great facilitated 6-week walking program that is free and open to everybody. So if you know of anyone that this might be a great program for them, it'll start on June 15th. And Priyanka, who's here today, is as the facilitator, and she can answer any questions. And it's all available on our website at pasadenavillage.org. But that's my commercial, and just wanted to pass on to you. I hear this is going to be a facilitated discussion, so don't forget to unmute, but I'm sure Jessica and Kate will tell you all about that. I'm going to mute us in the room just so that you don't get any feedback. But once again, thank you so much for being here, Creative Spark, and we are excited to get started.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much. We're so excited to be with you all today and to be exploring this topic, which we've coined the creative path to longevity. What really this is exploring the intersection between arts and aging, really emphasizing this idea of rediscovery, however that might manifest itself with you. For me, I find creativity to be an amazing tool to connect with myself, my innermost self, and it also creates pathways for connections to others. And so I do find rediscovery in that way, whether I'm rediscovering community or my relationships or rediscovering things about myself. My name is Jessie McCracken, and I'm so excited to be here with Katie Wade. We are Creative Spark. This is going to be an interactive experience. We have several exercises of doodling and free writing, so colorful pens are helpful, and paper if you don't have those handy. A lot of things you can visualize in your mind as well. The whole point of this is really to energize and inspire. And we're hoping that through these exercises, we'll tap into a bit of ourselves, and through sharing what we're experiencing through the exercises, we'll create connections with each other. So I'm going to pass it over to Katie to talk a little bit more about our parent organization.
Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to be with you all today. And so Jessica and I, Creative Spark, the program we're with, is part of Front Porch, which is a senior living and services organization in California, throughout Southern and Northern California. And we have these 3 pillars in our organization that you can see on the screen. We have affordable housing, life plan communities, and then community services. And Creative Spark lives in community services. And so that's where we get to do cool programs and work with older adults, with intergenerational groups out in the community, mostly in Northern California, but also virtually throughout the entire nation. So we have some virtual social connection and creativity programs as well. So that's how we're situated and how we come to you today.
Awesome. So just to give you a little framework of what today is going to cover, really, we're going to introduce the idea of what creativity even is. What do we mean by it? We're going to talk about why it's important. Great. And we're also going to talk about ways that we can bolster creativity within ourselves. We're going to look at research and strategies and talk about how not only it can benefit or enhance our own lives, but ways in which we can encourage others to participate in creative endeavors or support them in their creative endeavors, which I always think is such an important component of this, is that community, that village mentality. Yeah. So that's what today we're going to look at.
Love it. So what do we mean by creativity when we think about that, especially this term creative aging, that it's sort of the field that we're in? And a couple of things to think about. One, when I think about creativity, there's a lot of literature on what that is. And we think about it with a pretty broad brushstroke. So I like to say, I picked this up somewhere. If you can make a sandwich, then you're exercising creativity, right? It's in our everyday throughout our days. So this concept of big C creativity, which is like public creativity, little c creativity is the private creativity that permeates all of our lives and all the decisions we make every day about what I put on today, how am I going to represent myself in the clothing I'm wearing, how do I craft this delicious sandwich that's before me today, what layers am I going to put on? You know, it's in the choices that we make, and we can, with practice, strengthen the muscle of creativity. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. And we also take that same kind of broad brushstroke approach towards thinking about aging. It's a spectrum, right? There's this great quote from Gene Cohen, who's widely considered the father of creative aging. Aging is a journey, not a destination. Just as creativity is a process, but not a product, right? It's all about the process. And so aging, we're all on the spectrum of aging. Is a journey we take throughout our whole lives if we are lucky. And so we want to kind of think about aging in that spectrum. We also know that Jessica and I, through work with our elders through the last few decades, have picked up some particularly important gifts to share out with the world that come with elderhood, right? We've picked up some notes about that and how it influences creativity and how we think about creativity. So you're going to pick up on some of that today as well, probably. So we invite you to join us in thinking about both creativity and aging as this broad brushstroke spectrum that's a part of all of our lives. And to kind of get us warmed up and thinking about our creativity, you know, stretching those muscles.
Interactive element.
Yes. If you are willing to unmute and join a conversation, we invite you to think about how have you been creative today? And you might want to share that out loud with us. You might be a person that likes to put it in chat. Either way, so that could be from the moment you got up and what you chose to put on, you know, how you handled a problem that came around in your commute today. We invite you to share. How have you been creative so far?
Sally, I see you unmuted.
Did you mention me?
Yes, Sally, hi.
Hi. Well, today I'm our writing teacher for the Pasadena Senior Center died about 5 or 6 weeks ago. And I had told him that I would be sure that the writing group went on. And he had led it for decades. And so it's been an adjustment for them. But I am now the leader of the writers group for the Senior Center. And it's been a really creative experience for me. I really enjoy it. But today, what I did creatively was I wrote a story. And it was sort of an epic story. It was about my frustrations involved with receiving a case of low salt black beans from a company up in Minnesota, some of which were dented. And it took me from February until June to get the issue resolved. And it was an adventure. It was ridiculous. It involved letters, phone calls, promise checks which weren't sent, coupon sent I couldn't use. Finally, a letter to their VP of marketing, which did have some effect. And then lo and behold, I got yesterday a case of a very heavy package that someone brought up to me. And he said, I think this book's in here. It's very heavy. And I looked, and lo and behold, it was from the Bean Company. And they had sent me a gift carton of beans, carefully packed, carefully packed in styrofoam, those things. Anyway, I opened it up, and before I even unwrapped it, the box was perfect, as was the first box that I had, which contained a number of dented, almost half the cans were dented in the first box. That was where the problem arose. And then I got this replacement box sent at the behest of the vice president of marketing with an apologetic letter from her enclosed. And I look, and before I've even unwrapped the plastic around the tray, of some of them are dented. And it's just, the whole thing is hilarious. It just, people were just screaming with laughter because the whole thing was utterly ridiculous. So
Sounds like
now I have to decide, do I want to hurt her feelings by telling her that she sent me dented beans?
My
you
goodness.
climbed a mountain and wrote a story about it. I loved it.
It was my creative effort for the day.
Yes.
Anyone else? Did you choose delicious breakfast? Anyone? Have a good. All right. Don't be shy. We'll encourage you to unmute and share throughout this experience today. Thank you, Sally, for sharing. All right. I'm going to get back to scene. All right. Jesse, what did you have anything creative so far today? I should ask you.
Starting a new every once in a while in the mornings. I tend to get up quite early. I put on good music, and I'm just doing like a watercolor. I'll make a card out of it and send it to someone. Just trying to get paint on paper and like a nice little morning meditation.
Love. Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to move along. Thank you all. To thinking more about Jean Cohen, who Jessica and I love. We love the work of Jean Cohen so much. Big heart eyes for the work of Jean Cohen. And we have some suggested readings if you all want to dive into thinking more about creativity and aging. And these books are both from Jean Cohen, and he did a ton of research at the federal level, was the first person to get funding to study arts and aging from the federal perspective, and did just some truly pivotal research around the effects that creativity and arts have on our bodies and our minds. And he's captured a lot of that in these two books that you see here on the screen, which is The Creative Age and The Mature Mind. And Jessica's just shared with you in the chat a handout. It's a reading list that we recommend. It's not just books also, but different media that you can consume around the concept of creative aging if you want to dive in deeper. And these two books are linked there. And I'll tell you, I mean, I love The Mature Mind. It literally changed my life. It changed the way I thought about myself as an aging person, the way I thought about my potential throughout the lifespan. So I highly recommend it. And Jessica loves The Creative Age.
I do.
Yeah. And that one has some practical programming that's been effective, and how people are connecting to their joy and to each other through creative programming. So there's some great practical tips in there. And I just want to share a little excerpt from the Mature Mind, if you'll indulge me. But early on in the book, he writes, he's taking all this research that's been done, and this was released in 2005 and continues to hold up. So there's new research in the last few years that support all that he laid out early on, that our brains are ever evolving and growing. And so he said, the brain is continually resculpting itself in response to experience and learning. New brain cells form throughout life, and the brain's emotional circuitry matures and becomes more balanced with age. And the brain's two hemispheres are more equally used by older adults. So he really lays out 4 principles, how to think about our minds as they get older and the potential that is there. And I love the framework, and he fills it all in with stories and research in the book. So we want to think about ourselves how do we tap into that neurological growth that he's describing that we all have in front of us? Creativity, he suggests through his research, and Jessica and I agree that creativity is the path to that connection in our brains and our minds and to connect with each other. Anything else, Jess, on Gene Cohen? Oh, I didn't describe. He has in the picture you'll see on the screen for those who may not be able to see, there's Gene Cohen, a man holding a blue umbrella with white clouds painted on it.
The umbrella with the clouds on it is inspired by his book Sky Above Clouds. And so the idea is that, you know, your point of view changes when you get to a certain vantage point. And so I do recommend, I love, thank you for adding more book topics in the chat, because I myself love exploring a good read, and I think sharing that out with each other is so fun.
Agreed.
So diving deeper into Gene Cohen, who's really guiding this conversation for the moment today, this is going to be another interactive moment. So those pens and papers are going to come in handy. He has this really cool concept called that he called the social portfolio. So you'll be familiar with a financial portfolio and the need to diversify, you know, revenue sources or investments. You know, Gene really advocated for this idea of a social portfolio, and, you know, looking at, you know, your activities in your life or resources, you know, that you might have available, and making sure that you're diversifying those as well. You know, same approach to a financial portfolio. He really emphasized how you can find a sense of meaning and purpose through participation in activities, the need for self-reflection and social connection, so that internal and external connection, and the benefits of physical health that can come from these activities, keeping those in mind. We'll dive into that kind of research a little further, but, you know, just hand-eye coordination, balance, those are the kinds of things that these activities can actually address. We'll dive into those later, but first we wanted to explore this idea of social portfolio together. So on your sheet of paper, if you could make this kind of grid, so it is a big plus sign or two intersecting lines on your page, creating 4 spaces in which to write. Thank you, Katie, for that visual aid. I'm going to use a different color for my grid because it's fun. So I'm just doing 2 intersecting lines. I'm not going to do the box around it. I don't know why, because I chose not to. So if you see the scaling on this social portfolio, on the left side of the screen, you'll see that we're talking about low intensity versus high intensity. So you could think about that in regards to like physical or mental exertion. So the bottom row would be low, and then it would go to high on the top row. And then similarly, along the top, you'll see the individual versus group. So we're thinking about individual activities versus group activities. So how that manifests itself is that first square would be a high intensity individual activity. And I'm actually going to make a note of that just so for my reference. So that first top left square is high intensity individual activity. Just to the right of that, so that would be your second square just to the right, that is high intensity group. Below that, let's say in that same column, so that would be the bottom right-hand corner, this is low intensity, but group. And then just to the left of that, your final square is going to be low intensity individual. And let me tell you, I've been working on this social portfolio project for a while. This isn't something that you're going to just complete in the minute and a half that we give you. This is something you really need to think about and ponder. I propose two things. Number one, what do you currently got going on? And where would it fall in your grids? For example, book groups. We just talked about, you know, our reading list and suggested readings. Book groups would be a group project, low intensity. I mean, for you, if you're thinking mental exertion, that might be high intensity. Again, this is like your thing. I think of intensity mostly about like physical activity, but that's just where I'm at in my life. Let's give you a couple. Katie, is there anything you wanted to add to my explanation?
You nailed it.
So the idea is we're going to fill it with what we currently got going on. And then I would suggest in another color, are there things that you want to do that you might want to add in this? And where would it fall? We're going to notice gaps in our social portfolio. Where are things like, you know, where are there, you know, things not happening in these squares that, you know, maybe we really should be leaning into or researching. What could I do that's, you know, high intensity group? I'm going to be quiet for a moment and give you a chance to think. Let's come back together, and I'd be interested to hear what ideas come up to, you know, anything that you want to bring to the group. Like I'm noticing this, or I'm looking for ideas for what's coming up for you all. Yeah, Louise, hi.
Hi. Well, I'm filling out the 4 boxes and I'm noticing I have a lot of low intensity group activities compared to the other 3. So I never would have been conscious of that, I suppose, without writing this down. So that's just interesting.
And you know, actually, I noticed on mine, I have less, that's my least box. And I was actually curious from the group, what's like, Louise, what works for you? What are you finding really meaningful in that low intensity group that you might suggest that I look into?
Well, for instance, in the low intensity individual, I wrote reading. So if I'm by myself and I read a book, I consider this solo, and it's a low intensity. But then if I have a book group where we've read a book and then we discuss the book, so it's not like we read the book together, but it's related to reading. So it's book, and it's I think it's better when it's a group. Individual, I do watercolors, so I can do watercolor by myself. But then in the group, I have a group that meets every Monday morning and we paint together. And that's much better, I think. I mean, for the brain, it's more fulfilling. It's the same activity, but it's done with a group. So I can walk by myself, take a long walk, go to Descanso Gardens or Huntington Garden by myself. Very pleasant. I do it often, but I do it also with friends. So that's with a group. And when I do it with a group, it seems more fulfilling. So
Thank
This
you.
this is important. I love that you're sharing that, Louise, because I've actually heard a lot of people talk through their social portfolio and not make this point of it's the same activity. I just do some of it solo and I do some of it in group, and it feels different. It feeds something different in me, right? Depending on how I'm doing it, because it's such an easy way. Then it made me immediately look at my list and go, okay, is there something I'm doing in one of these that I might want to ratchet up the intensity or take into a group zone to see how that changes the experience for me? But it's something I already do. So I love that lens.
That's awesome. Anything else popping up for people that they'd like to share? And hello to Dorsey. Good to have you. Steve, what about you? Did anything come up? You like I just call on people? Anything for you, Steve or Anne? Yeah?
Well, I'm a volunteer over at Westside Pacific Village, but myself, talking about personal, whatever, I like to walk, and like the other lady was saying, I walk with friends, my wife, and I used to walk with some of the clients that we have, Westside Pacific Village, walking buddies, right? Yeah. And it fulfills me. And it's a good way to know people, and we signed up for, we have Senior Citizen Center on Culver City, on Overland and Culver. And we go there once in a while, and, but it's a good thing to give back.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I like about Westside Pacific Village. And I'm curious about how you guys, Pasadena, how you deal, having outings, stuff like that. And yeah.
Thank you. Pasadena, did you have any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I have hearing aids, so.
Oh, no worries. I was just asking the Pasadena group if they had any thoughts on or comments on the outings.
Well, we have a very packed calendar at Pasadena Village. It's all member led. So we have over 60 events this month. And we're going to the LA Pops, Pasadena Pops, at the Arboretum. So if you want to join us and make the drive over here, we'd love to see you. And we're going to exhibit at the Forest Lawn Museum, and then having lunch afterwards at Tam O'Shanter's in Glendale. That should be fun. We have lots of outings. We have a walking group almost every Friday, hiking groups, a lot of
Yep.
small group gatherings, knitting, that's creative.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes we do these activities and it's about building community, but also just getting people together. We have an active book club, and I hadn't even thought about it, but we have a wise aging book club too. So our book club is mostly novels. And wise aging is books about aging.
Ooh, what kind of, you got the creative aging suggested reading in there now. I'm hoping that'll inspire, get the,
Yeah, I'll
the
pass that
content
on
there.
to Catherine.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about mine, and if you hadn't made that analogy about a sandwich, I don't think I would have written down, like, I love cooking.
Mhm.
And I love cooking with my daughter, so I think I was like, oh, that's a group activity, and I couldn't decide if it was high or low intensity, but I'm gonna say high intensity. Because it's definitely active, and I was thinking about like how much space in my head it takes, and I think it's very creative. And I don't think I would have thought of it if you hadn't said something about the sandwich. So
I love that. Oh, that makes me so happy. Cooking's on my list as well. It's so creative. It's so creative. Oh, this
Thank you for the input, because Pasadena has a lot of things going on. And West Side Pacific is not as, up to speed as you guys are. I give you credit.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Well, we're always so impressed by how many service requests you fulfill. All your volunteers are so active in helping our members, or helping members stay independent. So thanks for everything you do.
It's
Thank y'all.
It's been fun. Go ahead, sorry.
no, that's great.
Good. I love it. I love this. And one thing I wanted to say about this social portfolio exercise before we move on into the creative aging research is just how important it is to diversify the social portfolio, the creative ways that we engage ourselves and each other, because life inevitably hits one of those quadrants, and kind of hits it hard sometimes, right? Like where the thing that you love to do in that high intensity individual quadrant you can't do right now, or you need to adapt or change, right? And so it requires us to shift and make sure if the rest of our portfolio is strong, it can still hold us in social connectedness and grounding us into ourselves. And that's just the whole point of this, is thinking like, how do I diversify a bit so that when things come and life creates changes for me, I feel great. I have those other areas to lean into.
I love that. I love that. Oh, the other thing I love. Oh, sorry, did Sally?
Well, yeah, I found that most of my individual stuff is physical and mental. I walk sometimes up to almost 2.5 miles, and I live in a very safe part of Glendale where there's very little traffic, and 2 blocks from where I live, it's all single family houses, and they're pretty and they're fun to look at. They're very different, and there are different kinds of yards and gardens and birds and so on. And so that's really cool. And then every morning I do almost 30 minutes of rather vigorous exercises, many reps, that I lie on my massage table because of replaced hips and so on. It's very hard for me to get up off the floor. So the massage table has enabled me to do floor exercises safely. And I really do them hard, and I work at it. And then the mental is, of course, the poetry. And sometimes that is high intensity because it tends to come in the middle of the night when you'd rather be sleeping. And if you don't write it down then, it will be gone by morning and you will never remember it again. And so, yeah, I have some pretty high intensity individual things. And this was all heightened by the pandemic and having to be alone. But because I was alone, basically I had no friends until I went to school. And my brother was 5 years younger. So, I learned to be alone. And it's like backwards to when I was 5 years old or younger, and just enjoying being myself and not feeling I had to be with other people all the time. And actually, once the pandemic was over, I found it hard. Well, I Zoomed with groups all during the pandemic, but my need to get together with people is still minimal as far as physically joining a group. I have a book group here where I live. and I do puzzles with someone, but other than that, I've got a lot of farm friends and Zoom friends.
Mhm.
Like so many of us, yes.
I can totally relate. Well, we're gonna dive into getting back to our PowerPoint slides. This is where we're gonna kind of talk about what creative aging is as a field. We've been talking kind of how it manifests in our lives individually. I wanted to kind of talk about it as a greater context as a field. I'll be going over this intense research that's like goes back 60 years in a brief amount of time. But I highly recommend if you're into research or learning more to dive into any of these areas, particularly our first one, who you may be familiar with, Dr. Marion Diamond. Who is was a professor up here and researcher at UC Berkeley, pioneer, absolute trailblazer, actually studied Einstein's brain. So a neurologist who really kind of shed light, whose research shed light on our brains, like happiness, their connection to our autoimmune system, and also more importantly for this context, brain fitness. So the idea, what Dr. Diamond found was that your brain changes, it grows from stimulation. And so when we're thinking about creative practices, auditory, visual, kinesthetic, those stimulations live in different areas of your brain. And so when you're doing these creative practices, your brain is actually creating new pathways that you'll be able to access, for years to come if you keep them up. So that brain fitness has been pivotal to be the base of creative aging work. Erik Erikson is kind of more on the psychosocial end. And if you read anything on creative aging, Erik Erikson is mentioned, I mean, hand over fist. And so he had what was called the developmental theory, which really built upon Freud's concept, but took it a step further and actually took the age brackets further. So he looked at elder years, where Freud really did not. He looked at elder years as a time of reflection, where a sense of meaning and purpose is paired with a need for expression and connection. So again, if we're looking at how that is then applied to creative aging work, we're talking about purpose and meaning, self-expression and connection, all these things. The creative process creates an amazing path. Then in the 1970s was the first time that skilled nursing facility was ever researched. And what they did, Langer and Roden had this pioneer study around freedom of choice. So what they did was they gave everyone at this skilled nursing facility a plant. And some people were told exactly how to take care of the plant, and the other people had a freedom of choice, were able to independently decide how to take care of the plant. Well, they found that the people who had that independence, that freedom of choice, were happier and more active. And so it just goes to show how important it is to have a diverse calendar, a diverse sense of offerings, because then people can choose what works for them and they'll be happier, more invested, more active because of that. And also the creative process itself is full of choices. Any project that you go after is full of choices. So then as we move into more contemporary research, Dr. Gene Cohen, he has this great quote about creativity being chocolate for the brain. And I think that's an excellent way to think about it. Just something that stimulates, that sweetens, that brings joy. He was really the first to get funding for this intersection between creativity and aging from the federal government. He really led the path for everything that we see today. And so current research, present day research really looks at These two, I would say, are kind of the most predominant in the recent future. Seeding Vitality is from E.A. Michelson as a funder. Seeding Vitality is bringing creative aging work into museums, into libraries, looking to bolster creativity in places that tend to have a larger population of older adult participants. Where Staying Engaged was actually done through the National Endowment for the Arts. So again, national funding going to this intersection of arts and aging. And this Staying Engaged was actually interesting because it was with the NIH Health and Retirement Survey. So this is a national survey that goes out, and it never had any questions about art, engagement, participation, consumption of culture and creative practices. It was in 2014 was the first time that ever happened. And so Staying Engaged is kind of the data analysis of what they found at a national level.
You did 60 years so fast.
I felt like my brain was going faster than my tongue could keep up. That's how it goes sometimes, you know.
Love it. Thank you for sharing the whole kind of underpinnings of creative aging as a field. So what Jessica and I did when starting Creative Spark, which is born out of all this research and also our personal professional practices from the last couple of decades, is look at all the research and pull out what are the most salient, common principles that show up in creative aging research. And these 4 principles are what were most common, which is well-being, growth, connection, and then ultimately culture shift. So all of the research talks about how the mind-body connection and how creativity just fuels the mind-body connection to its healthiest state. Growth, thinking about building creative confidence and skills, right? As well as our general participation in our communities. Connection, the ability for creative programming to create meaningful pathways, not only to connect with each other, but to more deeply connect to ourselves. And I like to even think about more deeply connect to a culture, a community, a universality, something bigger than even just the few of us here now, right? So there's these layers of connection. And then ultimately, for programming that's really hitting all of these principles, you'll see culture shift. You'll see that the visibility of the aging process and older adults can grow through creativity, through creative programming. It can change the way we think about ourselves and the aging process. Creativity is really, recently we had a speaker on one of our events, Heidi Wagner, say like creativity is the pathway to change hearts and minds. That's how we see change occur, you know. So exploring new ways together through creativity. So this is the framework, these creative aging principles that make up how we think about our programming, and we're in consultation with other organizations, how you can think about, is our programming hitting each of these points? You know, are we moving towards culture shift by also targeting well-being and growth and connection? One thing, there's a great video out there from Aloha, which is now E.A. Michelson Philanthropies, around the ability of creativity in the arts to create perspective shift and culture shift. So I'm going to share it. It's 3 minutes long. It is just kind of music audio. So I'm going to read what's on the screen. It's a visual description for those of us who might want that. But this is a great way to think about how creativity can change our minds and our hearts. Words on the screen, like creating a wall of words. Alone, lifeless, feeble. Person walks across the screen. There once was a wall. Children pass on the screen right through the wall. It was invisible to children, but adults could sense it. And once they were aware of it, it felt unsettling. It made them anxious and fearful. we do? New possibilities here. Wonderful possibilities. If you sing, you can find joy. If you dance, you can find happiness. If you painted or performed or wrote or engaged in any form of creativity, the very nature of the wall can change and change you. When you add the arts to aging, you can be more resilient, more engaged, happier and healthier. This isn't just storytelling. This is reality, supported by research. The arts do more than fill the world with beauty. They fill people with life. Life with purpose. Life with connection. Life with joy. Let's end fearfully. And discover the wonder of artful aging.
Katie, thank you for narrating that. Oh my gosh. You know, the way you talk about the principles and then leading into this, I'm just so inspired.
I love thinking about creativity as a path to new ways of viewing ourselves and each other. It's beautiful. Yeah. So let's think about how to tap into our own creativity so we can lead.
Yes.
All right. Tell us, Jessica, what are you thinking?
All right. Well, I have read a couple different articles, and we have a resource page that we'll close with at the end that I could always email out. So what I have found is there's a couple different buckets of how to tap into your own creativity I wanted to bring to the table, being mindful that we have 9 minutes together and I want to cover a lot of stuff. So I'm going to go kind of quickly with this. And Katie, can you guide me with the changing of the tab? So get a culture fix. What was really interesting about this is there's been so many studies, even back to 1996 in Sweden is like the first time people studied like, what does it do for older adults when they go to cultural events like the museum or the opera? You know, there's really positive health and social benefits that come about just getting this culture fix. So am I bringing that into my life? Next idea. Stimulate your senses. That really has to get to like enriched environments. I'm really mindful of my work area or where I want to do my creativity, making sure that it like supports the creative process. Are there things that I find interesting or inspiring? Is it free of clutter? Does it feel like kind of a ritual? Can I try new things to stimulate, get out of my habits, stimulate my senses? Then we have something that we're coining, put a spin on an activity. And Katie, you had such a, when we were chatting, can you tell me what you think about that?
Yeah, I was thinking about there's so many pieces of our lives that we kind of get in a routine of, right? They're habitual. They're things like the path I take to work every day, or when I go into my grocery store, I always start on the left side of the grocery store to do my shopping, right? And put a spin on it, ask us to strengthen our neural pathways by just doing things a little bit differently, inviting creativity in. So that might be taking a different path to work. It might be when I walk into the grocery store, I start on the right side today, right? So it can be small things. It can be how I put that sandwich together. I'm going to try some new ingredients, see how they play with each other. The other day I was saying, you know, I'm going to cuff my cardigan twice today. Let's see what happens, right? Like it can be tiny little moments that we invite in that just are shifts in our daily activities.
Yeah, just that peppering.
Yep.
And being, I like that intentionality around it too. Then we also include learn something new. We know how important it is to learn something new, but I dare to say to add into that, pick up something you left behind. I know for myself, there are things that I have enjoyed in my life that I just don't make time for anymore. You know, dust it off, or reach out and try something new. So these are just bucketed areas to kind of get us thinking of how we might be able to tap into our own creativity.
And lastly, we want to think about how do we invite others in to join us, right? Sounds like we have some social folks on the call that naturally do this. But what we want to think about, especially if we're trying to be really intentional about creating creativity together, is kind spaces. How do we create welcoming environments, virtually, in person? And so there are some tried and true practices on the screen that let people know they're welcome here. They're welcome to join us. Things like, how's the lighting? How's the ambient noise in the space? Are we greeting people when they arrive? That's true for virtual and in person. Jesse and I've been on, especially early COVID, we'd get on calls and no one would say anything as we waited for the call to start, right? We'd be dead silent for 5 minutes. And I thought we would never do this in an in-person room. But as people are joining, you're welcoming them into the space. And we want to do that virtually too, right? Refreshments, active listening. Do we have some conversation starters in our back pocket? Especially, there's some great creative conversation prompts on timeslips.org, one of our favorite creative websites, that has storytelling prompts and creative conversation starters. So have a couple of those in your back pocket. You know, are there accessible spaces for anyone, right? Wheelchairs, walking devices, etc. Is there a restroom nearby? Is that accessible to get to? And all the ways that this translate into virtual experiences. So you'll notice that we invited people in. We said hello when they joined. We talked about you can use chat or you can use your words. I'm going to describe what's on the screen. These are all little ways of creating an inclusive environment that really like set the stage for creative conversations, creative experiences to happen. Jessica and I think about this is the base layer that allows people to join you where you're at and be creative together.
Yeah, you know, especially at a time where people are really kind of re-engaging. I hear across the board, you know, people are having a hard time themselves reactivating or getting, you know, participation in activities. And so I think being really mindful about these things and really kind of pushing the button on them is so important. The other thing I want to add is there's really a psychosocial element to creating welcoming spaces. And the research shows there's 3 kind of main categories or key elements that we want to think about. And the first one is really trust. Like, how are we creating a sense of trust with the participants or with the community we want to engage? And that really has a lot to do with like modeling the behavior of the facilitator or the leader. You know, making sure that, you know, we're taking onus on ourselves as group leaders to create trust within the space. And that's really about showing up. You know, there's a lot of ways you can form trust. Number 1 is like being present fully. Number 2, identity, the having people be able to bring their authentic selves and be celebrated for however their like unique identity presents, however that is. But being mindful of that, of like, you know, it does all feel welcome here, and celebrate it in a real way. And then number 3 is connection. And that's definitely connection to yourself and connection to others, but connection to purpose really came up a lot. And how do you create a welcoming environment, one that really promotes engagement? That purpose is there. So trust, identity, and connection, as we're thinking of an individual experience, and how to promote that within our villages.
Beautiful.
Katie, what was the conversation prompt website you mentioned? I missed it.
Timeslips.org. I'll write this in the chat as well.
Thanks.
Which is founded by Ann Basting, a leader in the creative aging field. Beautiful creative conversation prompts.
Well,
And
nice to see you.
Hi, Shizzy.
Hey, Shizzy,
Hi, Judith.
you.
We are at our time and want to invite any thoughts, comments, something that's come up for you or a lingering question. We have a couple of minutes.
I just have one comment, and that is that as I'm 90 years old, and so I can, at my age, I thought, well, why not be myself? If I don't do it now, when am I going to get the chance? And this actually started a long time ago, but it's really very freeing to be old. It's cool in many, many ways.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's inspiring to me.
Yeah, I had, when I was 81 years old, I had a rhinoplasty because I had a nose I'd hated my whole life. And I got rid of it. And now I have a pretty nose. And I'll share the poem I wrote about it. It's very short. I altered my schnoz, and that was because it was always too big for my face. It was way out ahead. I went where it led, but I just couldn't keep up the pace.
Thank you, Sally.
I'm so glad to meet you. I'm really glad to meet you all. I hope I dropped a survey link in the chat box. Oh, if you could just click on that, it takes like 2 minutes. It helps really, we read all the feedback. And we really value your perspective. We're at creativespark.org. We have a blog. We have a newsletter that comes out. So if you want to stay in our loop, please just go to that link and you can sign up, put your email in for our newsletter. And I just want to thank you all. And Pasadena Village, you are a special, special group. I really enjoy you. And so thank you, Katie, for putting all this together. And I hope to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie and Jessica. We're going to give you a round of applause. I'm going to do a round. I'm going to stop the recording, but please stay and chat. And I know some of you came in near the end, so, you know, they'll ask us questions and see what we all got out of it. But let me stop the recording.
So thank you, everyone. I need to go, but
Okay,
Thanks for
I want to say hi to Shizzy. Shizzy, hi.